Today's show is sponsored by Smart's Give Greatness Contest. Go to coolcutteacher.com/greatness to enter an educator and yourself as the person nominating to win a classroom technology package valued at $40,000. Learn more about the details of this contest at the end of the show. 7 strategies I use when students make apps or do genius projects. This is episode 307.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
I am so excited. This is the time of year we are making apps. Now, while I'm talking about making apps in today's show, this will actually apply to passion projects, to making movies, any type of long-term project where you have the students brainstorm and create, because these 7 principles I'm going to give you apply to any type of project where you have kids ideate, create projects, and work together in teams. Now, I do want to give a shout out to my friends at MadLearn. We use their app platform, and no, they did not pay me to say that. I just love their platform, and that's what we use to make our apps. So the first thing is idea generation, or it's also called ideation. This is really the most important part because it's setting you up for whether you're going to succeed or not in your project. If you're going to have team problems, this is when you're going to see them. And you really have to observe the groups and to make sure they're working well together. You also want to push kids to do things that they're passionate about doing. For example, in this app project that I'm working on now, I had one group of kids that they were going to make a dog dictionary about all the different types of dogs that were out there and that sort of thing. And I wasn't entirely happy with it, but I never usually say no directly unless it's going to endanger somebody or something like that. I do a red light, green light, yellow light process, which means, okay, well, you're about to get the red light if you keep doing that. Or I'll say, okay, right now you're in yellow light, but this is what you need to do to get to green light. And green light obviously means you're going to head into production. And this is a term that's even used in Hollywood from what I understand, although I've never really been involved in movie making in that way. So they need to have lots of ideas. They need to connect. And I try not to intervene. For example, I had a boy who came to me and said, Miss Vicki, I want you to red light my group. I don't think it's going to work, and I don't want them mad at me. And I'm like, okay, well, why can't you have this conversation? Well, I just want you to handle it for me. And I said, well, and we talked about it 10, 15 minutes. And then he said, well, you're not going to intervene. I said, no. I said, here's the thing is I'm not just teaching about apps here. We're actually teaching about how to collaborate, how to work together. And part of life is having difficult conversations with folks. And I do agree with you, but I'm not entirely sure that me redlighting it is the right thing to do. Now, certainly there is a time for me to be the bad guy, but this wasn't the one because this particular student is very gifted, but also needs to learn to work with others. So I did not red light it, and they were moving ahead, and Dog Dictionary was going to be it. And I turn around, and this young man had the conversation with his team that he thought, well, you know what, this is probably not going to make. And I think that there's other apps out there too much like this, and maybe we should go to other teams that might be more successful. Well, all of them decided to red light their own app, and they split to 3 different teams. Now, this was the perfect outcome, but it was the perfect outcome because they decided it. They made the decision, and it was what they wanted to do, and I felt great about it. So the idea generation is so important. You want to come up with lots of ideas. You want to push them, help them do that. So then the second thing is I like students to go in after they've kind of come up with their idea, and I create a template or a hyperdoc in Google Docs. They'll turn around and make a copy of that, and it has everything they need to fill in. Now, I have constraints here. So, for example, they have to start with a 50-word description of their app, and they have to keep it to 50 words because if they were going to have their app in the App Store, that's pretty much how many words it would be. And I want them to make it compelling and why do we need this app? And they have to collaborate. So I'm actually looking at the revision history. So I see which kids are coming into class. I'll pull up the 4 or 5 Google Docs for all those kids. I'll go through them, and then I'll look at the revision history, and I'll say, hey, I only see one person editing on your doc today. What's going on? And then we have the conversation. You should see their eyebrows come up when they realize that they're not collaborating. And part of the requirements to get a green light is that they have to have a good working collaborative team. Because if you don't have a collaborative competitive team, you're not going to have a good project. Now, the important thing is to realize that these projects are bigger than one person can do by themselves. And this is why I love having massive projects that are too big for one student to do by themselves, because you want students to work in teams. No one person can run a Fortune 500 company by themselves, and we want kids to know how to work in groups like this. So we sketch things out. I also, in this document, have them do research before they can create their app and get the green light. They've got to prove to me that this app is needed, that they've done their research. They've got to hyperlink to that. And I actually require every single student to put at least 3 items of research in the document. Well, I could do this collaboratively, but by having every student having to research, I make sure that all the students know how to hyperlink, but also that they've effectively researched and they know how to do that as well. So this is when I'm kind of giving them a test. I have 5 big pieces. It takes 2 to 3 days. And they're not going to get the green light unless they move through this document, unless I see they're working effectively together. Now, in this document, they also have to come up with 50 ideas for their app names. Well, you could think, oh my goodness, why would you do that? Well, I have found the best app names typically come somewhere between number 7 and number 21-ish, because kids are so worried about looking cool that you have to push them past the cool factor, because honestly, if you're afraid of looking uncool, you're afraid of coming up with good ideas. So a lot of times what will happen is the kids run out of ideas, and then finally the cool thing becomes just throwing out ideas, and they'll laugh and they'll have some dumb ideas, but right in the middle will be some incredible ideas. And that's what you want to teach kids, how to brainstorm, and that you have to accept all the ideas, throw them in the document, and then decide what's the best. And we have a long conversation about what makes a great app name. We have to discuss SEO, or search engine optimization, and having a name that can be found on the App Store. Also, alliteration. We like things like Dog Dictionary that have the same first initial. We also like things that rhyme. So I have one app called the Swole Patrol, and that's about an exercise app by teens for teens. And that's a great one. They had another name that was just not so good. So again, don't look for these on the App Store yet. They're not there. These are just ideas that the kids are working on, but that's kind of what we do. Now, the third piece of this is you want kids to have jobs. So we have PMs, or project managers, APMs, or assistant project managers, and then graphic designers. Sometimes we'll have some marketing and social media. We'll usually have an editor. And this is important because in apps, you want to give credit. But the thing I always tell the students is that you may get the title, but to keep it, you have to earn it. So they can give each other all the titles they want, but and sometimes they'll propose titles. They'll say, okay, I want this person to do the app trailer. Okay, I'm fine with that. They can be the director of the app trailer. But if somebody steps in and does their job for them, they will lose that title, because in the real world, you have to do the job. And they are able to list these on their transcript for the school. So it's kind of awesome for kids to say, I was the PM or the APM of a particular job. And they learn so much when they have that. And it also is easier for me, because at the beginning of class, I'll say, hey, I need to meet with all the PMs and APMs at my desk. And I'll kind of just tell them where everybody needs to be and let them go out and handle their teams. And then I just turn around and I'm kind of like the CEO or the head coach, and just trying to coach all these teams to move forward. And I really want them to be leaders in their own group. Now, there are also phases of development. So we, like, as I said, the red light, the green light, in the yellow light. So red light means we have stopped production. Typically, the kids will red light themselves. It is very rare I have to red light them. Yellow light means that you can proceed, but you have to fix this, this, and this before you get the green light. And then green light means you go ahead to the next stage of production. Well, the first stage is get past the Google Doc, and then you have to get past me, and then I give you the green light, and then you go into app development. So they'll go in and they'll do their sitemap, and they'll also go in and get their basic theme and layout and that sort of thing in the MadLearn platform to kind of, show what the app will look like and do basic development. Now, then they have to make a foam board with their graphics, and they go in front of the principal and the curriculum director and typically another teacher. And they're having to present, they're having to sell their app, and they're also having to show the app design and convince those that they can move forward. Now, at this point, I will usually have a limited number that can move forward. They'll have to meet certain criteria. So think of it like a driver's test. Here in the state of Georgia, you have to make a 75 to pass your driver's test, which that number seems kind of low to me, but there you go. So I'll have a rubric, and you have to make a certain number of points on those rubrics to get the green light to go ahead to phase 2. do. So that's typically how I do it, which means about 25% of the apps are going to probably drop out of the competition just because they don't have enough points to be able to be green lighted to the next phase. And then the last phase is we actually have in front of the whole school in a judging panel to determine which app is going to go on the App Store. Now you could say, well, why do you want to do that? Well, that's my fifth point. It's okay to compete for limited resources. Sometimes when you have a movie or when you have an app or when you have just about anything that you produce that costs money, it costs money and you have a limited amount of money. So we have enough money to pretty much put one app on the store. Sometimes we'll have somebody in the audience might decide to fund another app. But that's happened before. This time, typically, it's just one app. So they're competing to see which one is the best and which one's going to go live on the App Store. And it's perfectly okay to do that. That is the real world, and that's how it goes. So we've had quite a few apps, iCare, Drone Zone, one called Uncut. There's lots of different apps. And you can look at the Mad Store, which is kind of like a staging area for apps before they go live on the official Apple Store or the Google Play Store, any of those places. And you can see a lot of student apps in there in the staging area of the Mad Store. And okay, so then the sixth thing is copyright. Now, this is one of the hardest things because the kids who wanted to do the dog app I talked about earlier, I really think that they thought it would be pretty easy because they could just kind of copy and paste information. You can't do that when you're making an app. You can't just take music when you're making a movie. The kids just think that they can just take whatever they want, and that's not the way the world works. And so you've really got to keep a handle on that copyright. Now, what I typically do is I will pull up the platform and copy and paste some pieces of it into Grammarly. And I have Grammarly Pro, which will do a plagiarism check. And it'll tell me pretty quickly if we have a plagiarism problem, and then they can end up with a red light. Now, you can ask, okay, what happens if somebody ends up in a red light? Well, we have the draft. So if you can think of the NFL draft, we sit down, we figure out those who don't have a team, and the project managers that are left will kind of draft those folks. Now, sometimes there are behind the scenes negotiations that go on. People notice somebody who's really great with graphic design on the other team, and they'll want them on theirs. So there may be some conversations. There's some trading. There's some things that happen behind the scenes, but everybody ends up with a team and to work on a team in the final competition. So you have these app teams getting larger and larger, getting more and more done. Everybody has to create a certain number of pages so that you can end up with an app with a good 30, 40 screens, is well developed, very strong app by the end. And the draft is interesting because I always tell students is that if your team got red lighted, would you want to be the last one drafted? Now, they'll never know because the draft happens with PMs and APMs privately in my room with the door closed. But the draft is actually very exciting, and it teaches kids so much about, the kind of folks that people want on their team. They want people that are easy to work with. They want people who pull their weight. They want people who will bring something to the team. And it's just a fantastic experience to do that. And then the last piece of this is that number 7 is that students need to develop collateral materials that go with whatever their project is. So while the students are creating apps, I have them create a website. I have them create an app trailer. They typically will create a Twitter, Instagram, social media type platforms to go with it so that it's a full offering. It's a full product, and they've really thought through, and those are parts of what they show. So when they do the final Shark Tank competition, they'll have their app trailer at that point. So the phase 2, they won't have their app trailer. You have to get a green light through phase 2 to be able to get to where you're going to have an app trailer. So they have all these collateral materials, and it's really a very well-developed project. Everybody has a team. Everybody's on a team. They can have those conversations. And for my students, I have found that when they go to college and when everything else is equal and you and all the other folks interviewing for that scholarship have the same GPA and you have the same activities and you're the best of the best. When my students can kick back and talk about the app that they made, and then when they were the project manager in the Shark Tank competition and how they spoke and how they were able to work through the problems that you have in teams, how you were able to motivate people who maybe aren't very motivated because it's the end of the school year, that really does make a difference. And I find that it's also very engaging for students and very fulfilling to have a meaningful product that comes out of this whole process. So I've given you 7 strategies or 7 techniques that I use when we're making apps. I hope this has been a helpful EdTech Tool Tuesday and kind of gives you an overview of how I like to run things, because this is a typical project setup for me where the students are running it, where I'm the coach, while I'm helping the kids. I'm encouraging encouraging the kids and that sort of thing. So I hope this gives you some insight. Feel free to tweet me at CoolCatTeacher if you have any questions about this, and also take a look at MadLearn. They're really cool folks. Thanks. SMART wants to recognize educators across the globe who inspire greatness in their students, peers, or community. Go to coolcatteacher.com/greatness to nominate your favorite educator in recognition of their greatness. Each nominee and nominator will be entered to win a classroom technology package valued at $40,000. So this means the winner and his or her nominee each win a $20,000 package, including one 7000 series smartboard and smart document camera, 30 Chromebooks, and smart training and implementation. Give greatness and nominate a great educator today.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.